Hello, and welcome back to Defining Endurance. I'm today's host, Lexi Miller. In this episode, I speak with Chris and Marni Plesko. They are an amazing couple local here to Colorado who rode the Colorado Trail on a tandem bike. In this episode, we not only talk about that adventure of being the first people ever to participate in this ride, which stretches over 500 miles from Durango to Denver on a tandem bike together as a married couple, but also how they balance being teachers and parents, as well as being a power couple. As you can tell, or as you've heard in previous episodes, talking about parenthood and balancing family is pretty important to me right now. And I think that they have some really awesome points. One of my favorite moments is when Marni compares the Colorado Trail to being the hardest thing she's done next to giving birth. So stick around, hear what this amazing couple has to say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hello, and welcome back to Defining Endurance. I am today's host, Lexi Miller, and I am joined by Chris and Marni Plesko. Chris and Marni are two adventurers, but not only have they completed some incredible journeys, they are also parents and employees, and we're going to talk a little bit today about family and adventure and how to balance the two. Guys, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I'm really excited to jump in for a lot of reasons, as we kind of chatted before. We're both kind of in a little bit of a state of chaos here. You guys have two kiddos, and as listeners might know, I'm just joining the motherhood force in full chaos. So talking about how adventure and parenthood and family all join together is super exciting to me, at least, and I know a lot of our athletes are in the same place. But to start, I kind of want to hear, what do people know you for?
They know us for Chris.
So I've raced mostly single speed endurance mountain bikes for a lot of years now. I probably since, 2006 or something like that. 2005 was when I got back into the sport after college, sort of. And so I've raced Tour Divide 3 times. I've finished twice, and I've held the single speed record on Tour Divide, which goes from Banff, Canada to the US-Mexico border. I've held that single speed record since 2009. And then I re-broke my record in 2016.
Wow. So tell us kind of how you have to prepare to do a single speed ride on something so gnarly.
Well, mostly you just give up gears entirely. I haven't had a geared bike in years other than the tandem, which we've been riding. And honestly, a friend of mine, Dave Nice, he introduced me to single speeding years and years and years ago, decades ago, probably now. And I kind of just fell in love with it. I did not have a ton of money at the time, probably still didn't for years to come. So single speed worked really well. It was cheap, and you could ride a lot. And, again, I was never a good climber, and single speeding turned me into a good climber. And I just loved it and never looked back, and kind of went farther and farther down the rabbit hole of these ultra endurance events. And it kind of became my thing, something I was really good at. And I don't know. I've been in and out of the sport over the years, but it's been awesome. And I kind of always keep getting pulled back in some fashion.
So we'll probably talk about it a little bit more in depth later on, but tell us, you mentioned the tandem bike, and so tell us about your adventures on that.
Yeah, so this summer, Marni and I became the first people to ever, as far as we can tell, ride a tandem mountain bike on the complete Colorado Trail. So we did the Colorado Trail race itself. So we started in Durango with all the other racers, and took 10 days, 13 hours to ride in self-supported fashion on the trail back to Denver, which was a pretty incredible adventure.
Definitely, to say the least.
No, I think, for people who don't know, that is completely self-support. There are no aid stations. They call it a race, but from what I've heard, I have been nowhere near it because I am not a cyclist nor that intense. But from what I've heard, it's just you're very much on your own. You don't always even see other racers. So we'll definitely talk about that more and how that was on a tandem bike. But to start our interview and to kind of talk to, get to know you guys better. How'd you guys find yourself in the endurance world?
Well,
Well, I started racing bikes like way back in the day when I was 16 years old. A guy named Ed Foster, who owns bike shops in St. Louis, Sunset Cyclery. Shout out to Ed and company after all these years. Um, he took me and another young kid on board, and we wanted to race triathlons. And he let us work at the shop and buy bikes at a discount because we had no money. And so I started kind of racing endurance stuff from that perspective. And I've just been in and out of the sport for years. I was a mechanical engineer when I was in college, so I started racing for CU Tri, and then I spent more time studying than racing. Kind of fell back into mountain bikes off and on, and really, I want to say Mike Kuriak. I read a lot about his crazy rides and his adventures back in the day, and that kind of like hooked me on wanting to do this stuff. And I've just been mostly in love with bikes ever since because it's the thing that doesn't get me hurt.
yeah, and I would say I tagged along with him. We always like to joke that I could ride with him on his rest days. But he, in college, took me on a mountain bike ride up in Boulder. I borrowed a bike and I hadn't ridden since I was a kid. And he was like, "Oh, this will be fun." And I, ended up halfway through the trail just kind of throwing down the bike and crying and being like, "You're the meanest person in the world." And it's a legit easy trail, looking back on it. But it was something that we could do together. And we went through some infertility stuff. And kind of as a way to deal with that, we went out and made the most of our time together. And we rode Kokopelli in the White Rim and did some longer stuff together and some bigger bike packing trips because we could and we had the time. And it was sort of one of those, well, if we can't have babies, we'll do this instead. And that really got me hooked at that time, was just having those big long rides together. It was an awesome experience.
No, those are amazing trails. Again, for people who maybe aren't living in the Colorado, Utah area, White Rim is this amazing 100-ish mile loop. Absolutely gorgeous. And Kokopelli stretches from Colorado to Utah, again, through some pretty beautiful terrain. So those are great adventures. Did you have any experience in the endurance world before meeting Chris?
No, not at all. Not in the slightest way. And I was not an athlete growing up, for sure. I was the youngest of four of athletes, and so as the youngest, I was like, no, I don't want any part of that. So meeting Chris, he kind of got me into cycling and has gradually over the decades introduced me to running and got me to see that as a valuable sport as well. So
And Marnie's a pretty incredible athlete, even though she probably doesn't usually give herself credit for it. For all the hours I would train over the years, she would train some small fraction of those hours, and still come out and ride with me, ride together. She used to race cross country races and worked her way up through what was then into the expert field with, relatively little time on the bike. And so I think there's a lot of talent and ability there that maybe she didn't ever get to experience growing up. And it's been really fun to see that come out as she gets older.
No, I would imagine that there has to be something in there, since you guys have done some incredible things. Like, that's not just the average weekend warrior endeavor, which I want to hear more about. So tell us about being, as far as you guys know, the first people to ride the Colorado Trail on a tandem.
So we are both teachers, and COVID hit March of 2020, and threw everything for a loop, just like everybody else in the world. But we were teaching from home and having kids learning from home, and we're finding a little bit more independence with our oldest son being able to watch the two of them for short snippets of time. So we were able to get out for little pieces here and there, and whether it was runs or rides on the tandem, which was really the first we had been able to ride consistently on the tandem, because we needed to get away or we were all going to lose our minds. So we found ourselves, an hour here or there taking the tandem out on our local trail by our house, and we just truly loved having that time to be together. And it was addicting and we wanted more. And we were on a ride one day and I can exactly picture where we were when Chris was like, "Hey, what do you think about riding the Colorado Trail on the tandem? I don't think it's ever been done." And in my pandemic state, I was like, "Sure." and he held me to it. So then we went from there.
Yeah, I was never really like a tandem rider, and neither were either of us. I had watched JP and Tracy Peterberry race the tandem in Tour Divide in 2009, and always thought like that looks really cool, and that was the end of that thought. And a few years ago, Andy at Pedal helped hook us up with a salsa powder keg tandem. And that's kind of what got us initially like trying out a tandem, because it was something for us to ride together. I managed to like shove my two children onto the back of it, either as the tandem or we hooked a trailer bike to the tandem and it became the crazy train, which is very crazy, but lots of fun. And so we kind of like goofed around with the tandem, but didn't really take it seriously until COVID. And that became like the one time that the two of us could get out together.
Right. So how much were you guys actually able to train together for this event?
It was difficult, but again, it was snippets here and there. And with kids and with pretty demanding jobs, I like to say we didn't train a lot as much as we trained consistently. And we tried to get, here's our hour, here's our 2 hours. Luckily, my parents are in the area and bless their hearts, they were willing to watch the kids here and there for a day, a half a day, so we could do some longer rides. But we just did a lot of consistent effort leading up to it.
Yeah, the first part of COVID, we were home. So we were able to like go run with the kids or go ride with the kids or go sneak out for an hour ourselves. And that was okay. And then we went back to school. And with COVID, Marnie's parents, who had always helped with the children, were sort of temporarily out of the equation. So I was driving 100 miles a day to take the kids to school and drop Marnie off at school and then go work myself and then reverse the process while doing meetings in the car all afternoon. And so we didn't have a ton of time. We put the tandem on the trainer and rode Zwift, which was kind of crazy, but it worked.
It can be done.
Yeah, it can be done. And then, whenever we could sneak out, we'd get out for whatever time we could. And I think our goal was to be in as like good of shape as we reasonably could to get to the end of May when school ended. So that like once school ended at the end of May, we could throw as much as possible at it to get us ready for the race in July, which wasn't going to be perfect, but at least that was our best bet.
Yeah, and I think, as a mom, you'll understand this, but one of my favorite training memories is riding the tandem in the basement on Zwift, and our younger son, Ben, who was 7 at the time, he wanted a bagel with butter on it. But he was like, didn't want to maul the butter. So he brought it down. And so I sat on the back of the tandem and buttered his bagel for him while pedaling. I was like, here you go, buddy. And take the butter back upstairs. There was a lot of multitasking to make it work with two amazing and very understanding, but also, they're still kids, so they have their own needs.
So yeah, that kind of goes into one of the other questions I had for you. And again, as we kind of mentioned before, this is something that, I'm asking, one, because I think that people would be interested in, and two, because I'm extremely interested. How do you balance family and training, or family and big adventures?
Well, we try to take them when we can, right? I feel like that's a big piece of it, is we involve them as much as possible. Leading up to this, we needed some altitude work. Very fortunate to live in Denver at altitude, but needed some higher altitude work as well. So we drove up, we took our van up to Leadville and camped up there, took them horseback riding, took them hiking. They hiked to Elbert with us this summer leading up to it. So we tried to involve them as much as possible and make it fun for them too, because, that's important.
Yeah. And, I think to some extent in my mind, like balance is sort of a misnomer with this stuff. Like, I don't think there is a great balance. And I think, at least for me, it doesn't really work to be that balanced, right? Like, we tried to balance it, I guess, the best we could during the school year. And then once we got to May, June, beginning of July, it was like, okay, this is, the focus as much as we can right now. Obviously, as parents, like, there's only so far you can push that, but you're making a temporary sacrifice for a bigger picture thing. And as soon as we're back, right, then our full attention's on them. There's no rides. Like, a lot of that stuff unfortunately went by the wayside to like balance it out in the long run. But I think sometimes in the moment, like, there isn't a good balance. It's like, we're going to go ride for 5 hours today. We took them to like camp for a week and said like, hey, you're going to go to camp every day and we're going to go ride our bike all day.
Yep.
To have any chance of being ready for what the race entailed.
So how do you think that, kind of making that time for yourself and making that time for your adventure has a positive impact on the family?
Well, we've told the kids many times, like, this was who we were before kids. And if you want us to continue to stay married, we need to have the time to do those things. And I think that's true for any couple. And sometimes that's that you go on a date every week, or that you go on vacations together. But our relationship has been built for a long time on doing things adventurous together. We've hiked a lot of 14ers, we've climbed, we've biked, we've done all those things. And, that piece is really important to us and our relationship. So,
And I think we've been able to build adventurous children as much as children can be adventurous. We joke every time we take them out, like, which one is going to be the one that hates it today? Because one inevitably loves it, and the other one is like, this, you're torturing me. This is the worst thing ever. And usually they'll switch several times during the adventure. But we take them riding, we take them hiking, we climb flat irons together. Whatever we can do to get out. My older son JJ and I, we paddled Ruby Horse Thief in pack rafts and camped overnight in Black Rocks, and like, that's one of his favorite memories, right? And so getting to have those adventures together, it slowly becomes a thing that they can experience either with us or all together as a family. But there's pieces of us doing it individually as well, and I think they realize that, right? Whether they always know it in the moment or not, like, we are adventurers. Outdoors is a big part of our lives. And so they can come join us in those things, or they can, see us when we get back, and kind of try to do both as much as we can.
No, I really like kind of that perspective that, it's important to you guys too, to have that in your relationship. I was raised by two teachers who were also ultra runners. And so it's, I totally see it. Is you work really hard all school year. You're putting in that 40, so you can have an average of 40 hours a week during that summer when you're not working, and you need that time. So I think you seem very aware of what you need for your family to thrive. Along with that, I'm kind of interested to hear how doing big adventures with your spouse plays out. What were some of the challenges and what were some of the benefits of riding the Colorado Trail together?
well, I think even the adventure itself aside, training, I've supported Chris for years and years and years in his training for all these different adventures. And I think one of the benefits of him training and me not was that he could come home and I would have a great dinner made, and the kids would be taken care of, and they wouldn't be particularly needy, and the house would be clean, and the laundry would be done. And like, when he was in the depths of his training, like for Tour Divide, like, that's what he had to worry about. But then training the two of us, there was no one here to take care of us. There's no one like, here, dinner's ready. We're like, oh, we ordered out a lot. And, that was, you trained and you were exhausted and you came home and life still exists. So that was a challenge for sure. I was like, where's the maid and the masseuse and the chef? Like, so I think that was a challenge leading up to the adventure.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree. Like, we still had to run our daily lives. We still had to go to work. I've never been able to be a professional athlete. So even, putting in 34-hour training weeks before Tour Divide 2016, I worked 40 hours a week and didn't take a single day off, and 40 hours is a lie because it's really like 60. But nevertheless, like, I did have Marnie to support through all that. And then this time it was, the two of us getting everything ready, trying to get ready for the race, trying to keep the kids happy. And, that was all definitely a big challenge. And it was just fun finding ways to work that out together because I knew that Marnie was going to be tired. And so I think that was a difference in training for me too, right? Like I needed to be fit enough to get through this adventure, but more importantly, Marnie needed to be fit enough to get through this adventure. And if that meant I needed to sacrifice something for me to make sure she was more ready, that was also really important. Whereas like training for a solo adventure, you're trying to be as fit as you can. Whereas for this, we had to be as ready as possible as a team. And so that made, what I needed not always a priority. And that was a good perspective for me because, I wanted to make sure that she was ready for this because this was really new to her. Like we've done multi-days and bikepacking stuff, but this by far was going to be the hardest thing she'd ever done.
And I think that's where like doing the adventure together was really special because he got to be there for my hardest thing I've ever done, other than giving birth. But, um, it was cool to experience it together. And it was cool. Like he's always come home with these amazing stories, and I can live vicariously only so much. And then when I was out there were so many times that I was like, oh, I get it now. Like I really get it. And getting to see the views. And we went through one section that he had only done in the dark on his previous races. And so it was really his first time seeing it. And, to be there with him, seeing it for the first time, he was like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And that was neat to just share those moments together throughout the race.
Oh, I bet that was incredible. Were there any challenges with doing it with your partner?
With the race, I think the biggest challenge for the two of us is like, it's a pretty serious endeavor. Like the weather was really bad. And I've done the Colorado Trail. I don't know. Is this the fifth time? At least the fourth time. And I've had some bad weather before. 2017, when I dropped almost at the end, when I got injured, the weather was really terrible that time also. But there was only me to take care of, right? If anything happened, worst case scenario, Marnie's still at home with our children. This time, both parents are out in a pretty, serious situation in the middle of the woods at 12,000 feet in the rain. We're all wet.
Very cold.
Everything's wet. It wasn't a life-threatening ordeal because we had a lot of experience and we are good at working together, but it was a serious situation, right? Like you have to keep your wits about you. You've got to, keep on top of all that stuff. You can't get hypothermia. You can't make those wrong decisions. And so like, I think those were our biggest challenges during the race, is trying to keep both of us safe and on track. Like at one point I was like wearing Marnie's shirt because all mine were soaked and we were freezing at 12,000 feet. And so we had to really work together. And that's where I was really, happy for the strength of our relationship and that we're really good at working together, right? Like going into this race, I knew that was going to be something we could count on, is that when everything got hard, whether it was a time that we crashed, whether it was the weather, whether it was all sorts of things that are going to go wrong in an ultra, I knew that we weren't going to fight about it. We were going to come together and figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do now?
No, that definitely makes sense. And that kind of goes into the next thing I wanted to know is, in every relationship or household, everyone kind of has their roles or what they're strong at. How did that go into your adventure as well?
Well, I think at home, Marnie does just about everything. And I joked that I changed the brakes on the car once or twice a year, that's not really
That's
true.
not true.
But, Marnie does a lot at home. Like we're both teachers, but our professional responsibilities in our current roles are definitely very different. And I work a lot of hours in my role, even probably more than she does. And so she does pick up a lot of slack around the house, right? She's the primary cook at home on a day-to-day basis. And it was kind of fun on the trail because a lot of that was flipped.
Yeah, it was great.
Because she was pushing so hard physically, I was able to take over some of those other roles because I have a lot more experience in that setting, right? So like I was the one able to cook dinner. I was the one able to usually find campsites, buy food, like get supplies, make sure we had enough stuff for each section. And so we kind of traded and reversed those roles a little bit about what we do at home to out on the trail. So I think that was really fun.
Yeah.
But it was definitely different.
It was like a very not glamorous vacation for me. It was leading right after our anniversary. Actually, the day after we got, I don't even remember, a day or two after we got home was our wedding anniversary. And so there were a few times on the trip that Chris would be like, happy anniversary, as we're like freezing and slogging through mud. And so I told him like maybe a beach would be a great idea. But yeah, I think I forced him to take better care of himself than he typically does on his own. Like, why don't you wipe yourself down at the end of the day? Or like, let's wring out the socks before you just shove them on your feet, or like retape your, feet and your ankles. And so I think, we still took good care of each other for sure. But it was different. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I needed a little more margin for error than potentially I have on my own. Like, I think when I raced in 2017, I slept like 5 hours in the first 5 days and was very much hallucinating and not knowing what was happening in the world other than I had to keep riding my bike forward. And I really couldn't put myself in that deep a hole in this situation for a lot of reasons. One, because, 2 parents are on the trail, and 2, navigating a tandem is really difficult compared to a single bike. We weighed 350 pounds loaded combined, and that's a pretty light bike packing tandem. And it was a lot to haul around. So like Marni had to make sure I was keeping myself in good enough shape to keep doing that day after day, because we really didn't know how long the race was going to take. Like I finished as fast as 5 days before and want to finish in 4 days or under 4 days someday. And we knew that was not happening on the tandem.
So would you guys do it again?
Maybe. I would say if I were to do it again, I'd do the opposite direction. I don't have a huge desire to do that direction again. But there's lots of other things we'd love to do on the tandem. And we would love to ultimately do the divide on the tandem when we have people willing to watch our kids for long enough, because 2 weeks was pushing it hard as it was. We'd love to go back and just even do Kokopelli and White Rim and do all of that stuff again, just on the tandem, because it's so much fun and you're stuck together and no one's leaving anyone behind and no one's feeling like they're dragging someone else down. And boy, we just had a blast. So I think there's a lot of other things we would love to do. But, if someone said, hey, we'll watch your kids for 2 weeks this summer, do you want to do it again? I'd jump on it in a heartbeat, because it was beautiful. And I would, any second I would go back.
Yeah, I mean, same for me. I would love to do other things just because I'm not getting any younger and there's a lot of really cool stuff out there and I would love to do something new. But the CT is great. And if someone offered to watch the children so we could do it again and that was the only option, I would do it in a heartbeat. Like, the adventure was awesome. I know we could go faster. That's always, the hard part as a racer. You're like, ooh, we could go significantly faster if we did it again. Because we were pretty conservative in a lot of ways. And the time out there together was awesome. Yeah. I'd love to have that time again at some point.
No, you guys seem like such an incredibly strong team, whether it's parenting or on these adventures. So I guess the question to close out is, what advice do you have for people who want to create that relationship in their own partnership?
I would say just support each other. And, part of my role in this relationship in terms of sports over the years has just been, I'm not going to stand in his way. Like, what can I do to support you to meet your goals and dream big dreams and go see awesome things. And it's evolved into we both get to dream big dreams and see awesome things together. And that's even better. But I, if I said I wanted to do anything, he'd jump in and support me, without a thought. And I feel like that's a really important part of just fostering that with each other. Whether it's what I want him to do or not, that's not for me to say. And I don't know. I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, like we've been together a really long time. It's, I don't know, 17 years.
Married. Yeah.
Yeah. 17 years married, longer together. We've been together since basically we were
College,
just turned 19 years old. And so we've been through a lot. And so every time you go through something hard, whether that's athletically, whether that's education, whether that's everyday life, family, like you have a choice to support the other person and be a team together, or you have a choice to, push that person away. And so we've worked really hard in those moments because there's been a lot of really difficult moments to how can we come together as a team and support the other person, right? And so we were both in grad school with a less than 1 year old child, still working full-time jobs and not having very much money, right? That was a hard time. And so like the CTE was physically difficult and really challenging, but in lots of ways, like it was just a celebration of us getting to be together. Like we were so grateful physically we were able to do it. There were so many cool adventures on the trail. But we also got to spend 10 days with our best friend. And that
cool.
was what was so fun, to just get to do that the whole time. And so, my advice is try and grow with your partner and support them in whatever they're going through, knowing that it might not be easy and whatever you're wanting at that moment might have to wait. But if you can grow together, you just have a lot of really awesome things ahead of you. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, guys. You're so positive and so inspiring. I'm probably going to go upstairs now and try and convince my husband to run a stage race with me.
Do it.
But thank you so much for joining us. And, if anyone has any questions for these amazing couples, just feel free to ask them in our comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we love to answer questions. And if anyone wants to find out more about us or the race or ask Marni or I questions, I think easiest place to find us is Instagram. It's at Pivay, Pivvay, or at Mrs. Pivay, MRSPIVVAY. And I think it's the school year, so both of our accounts are on private, but you can request if you seem like a normal person. We don't mind answering questions.
Perfect. And I will tag you guys in the show notes so people can easily find you. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.